What's up, everybody? Welcome to the stream. YouTube is pissing me off today, so we're just gonna get right into it. I had like a cool musical intro type thing planned, but we're gonna have to save it for next week because today I made the stream and YouTube created two different streams, sent everybody two notifications, created two different streams. So I deleted one of them, and just deleting one of those streams deleted both of my streams. So I had to remake the stream. And now it looks like there's only one. But it looks like my last stream, the one about Pete Hegseth, YouTube made doubles. They made one of each. I guess maybe one was the iPhone version in portrait mode. But why would I want to stream twice? I thought if I streamed in both portrait mode and landscape mode, that just meant you guys could switch with the touch of a button. Excuse me, with the touch of a button between one or the other. But I guess I was dual streaming. So that's stupid. I don't know why StreamYard did that. I noticed that, yeah. We really have to switch over to Streamlabs. I don't hate StreamYard. I appreciate them for being like a beginner-friendly, streaming outlet that helps us do interviews and easy streams, but it's just not as good as Streamlabs. So I got to learn Streamlabs and pick up that instead. But we good. We're here. Z, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people noticed it. Some people were telling me, like, what is going on here with these streams? So, anyways, now we're here. We are going to stream the second day in a row. I told you guys there's going to be more streams coming at you from now on. Now we have 2 days in a row. Very rare for me to do that, but there's a lot to talk about. And I wanted to kind of go back in my bag, my old bag of tricks. Some of the most popular videos that I ever used to do when there wasn't much going on in the news was these infographics debunks, looking at these very popular YouTube history channels that give a very oversimplified bourgeois explanation of famous historical events and, play a big role in brainwashing the American public and framing how they see history, because these videos have like billions of views and they're very well produced. But there's a lot in them to debunk. So because we talked about the news and everything that's going on with current events and geopolitics and the class struggle yesterday on the stream, I figured today we would dig into history and theory a little bit and talk about the DPRK, one of my all-time favorite topics, and a topic that always seems to go viral. I've been saying lately, it seems as if the U.S. propaganda campaign against the DPRK has almost backfired on them, because they've made the DPRK seem so mystical and so, beyond understanding that Americans are like intrigued by it. And when they see somebody defending the DPRK, they're like, what? They like got to stop and watch, because they're, the narrative that they get about the DPRK is so comically evil. And then, within like 5 minutes of looking into the DPRK and their actual history, you're just like mind blown. Like, holy cow, I've been fed so many lies. So it's almost like they've demonized these guys so much that it's backfired, because a lot of the stories they tell about the DPRK are completely unbelievable, and people are now starting to question them. And anytime I make a video like, hey, the DPRK isn't that bad, here's how the US lies about them, it seems to blow up. So seems to be a topic that people are interested in, which means we'll have a good stream today debunking the Infographics show. Yeah, and I'm just ready to get right into it. So let's play the intro and get after it, my friends.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: you look like
All right. Welcome, everybody. I see a lot of Z's in the chat. What is up? 2 streams in a row. We are blessed. Thank you, comrade. Yeah, I'm coming at you. I'm like Santa Claus this Christmas, bringing you guys all sorts of streams. Solidarity. Have you thought about streaming on Rumble as well? They pay much better. Yeah, I've thought about moving. We talked about this yesterday. I've talked about moving to a more exclusive platform for monetary reasons, but right now I don't need the money that bad. I would stream to Rumble in addition to all of the platforms that we're streaming to, but I think what would be more monetarily productive, what would produce more money for me would be streaming exclusively to one website. So everybody has to go there and subscribe to you there and give you money there. Kind of like what Haas does or what Hassan Piker does on Twitch, and then uploading my highlights as YouTube videos. But as we said yesterday, I just want to get my streams on as many platforms as possible, to as many people as possible. So hello from Russia. Hello. How's it going, comrades from Russia? Hello from Flint, Michigan. Hello, welcome. I apologize for the fact that Nestle owns like all your water supply. I just learned about this recently. Obviously, I knew about the water in Flint, Michigan, and that the water in Michigan is so bad because it's controlled by private corporations. But like Nestle will buy up all of the freshwater sources in Michigan, or they have been. And then they bottle it and they sell it back to the citizens of like Flint, where they don't have any, clean tap water that they can drink. So Nestle monopolizes the clean water so that people can't get to it, and then puts a price on it and sells it back to you when it's water, something that all humans need, that we should, something that should obviously, I don't think many people disagree about this, should be owned communally, should be owned by the public. How do you monopolize water? We're literally headed for like Spaceballs, where they're selling us cans of fresh air, and only President Screw can have unlimited fresh air. Nestle has been a menace for a long time. You're exactly right. It's crazy, dude. I've made a couple videos about the history of Nestle and they haven't blown up. I guess it's just like a topic that's been beat to death with normies. But there's really no company that's as evil as Nestle. Maybe Goodyear or like Michelin or one of the tire companies who, along with Nestle, had like paramilitaries in Latin America working on their behest. But yeah, it's crazy what those companies have gotten into. They own most of the water rights to the Great Lakes. Exactly. So then people in Michigan don't have clean water, and Nestle's taking all the water out of the and Michigan, a state with more lakes than any other, I think, or very close to it, more water than any other. I mean, if that doesn't show you the upside down, backwards nature of capitalism, then what will? This state that has an abundance of fresh water can't get any water to their citizens because a freaking chocolate rabbit company, Nestle, is hoarding all of it. Wherever you see great wealth under capitalism, you also see great poverty. See all this fresh water and people dying of drinking poison water, dehydration. Hello from Madison, Wisconsin. Hello, comrade. I'm very close to you right now. We are not far away. I spent very much time in Madison. Join the American Communist Party if you haven't already. The Wisconsin chapter needs more good people, and I go up and do work with them all the time. All the time in my old home state. We're letting entitled nerds steal our resources. You're damn right. See, everybody, the media and American culture told you your whole life that it was the jocks like me that you had to be scared of, right? That we were the bullies and the mean people and the jerkheads. But it was actually the nerds, okay? Revenge of the Nerds lied to you. The nerds are the ones who were secretly plotting in the background to take over their world and enslave the jocks and exploit their labor. And, just because they had, you thought they were the good guys just because they didn't have power in high school. But now those are the Wall Street shareholders. Those are the executives. And the jocks are the ones working to 10-hour days to support their families and getting exploited. And that's why they get made fun of for reminiscing about high school and get told to close the yearbook because they have nothing in their lives anymore. They're being exploited and beat down by the nerds who monopolized our water. See, class struggle is pro-jock. The jocks are the proletarians. The nerds are the Wall Street execs. And they only were nerds because they didn't have to do anything growing up. I'm just kidding. I apologize if you're like a nerdy person who likes video games and math. I'm totally messing around. I do think it's a little bit bullshit though that like athletes got portrayed as like bullies and jerks. You know, while nerds are just like the victims, because it's not always that way. Anybody, I mean, think back to high school. Who were the ones who were mean, gossiping, talking shit? It was a lot of like the drama kids and the nerds. The jocks would tell you straight up to your face what they think of you. So I do feel like Disney Channel and all these creators of kids shows really gave athletes a bad name, especially like any Disney Channel show where a wrestler comes in. They're like this 300-pound meathead who like shoves people in lockers. Like, none of my friends are like that. All my friends are really cool because they wrestle. So it humbles you when you wrestle because you wrestle people who aren't as good as you, and it teaches you or who are better than you, and it teaches you humility. Anyways, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, ACP reservist here. Oh, that's dope. A couple of my wrestlers were in Eau Claire yesterday for a college tournament. So glad to hear. Dude, Eau Claire's got a lot of potential too. I know it's very liberal, but you know, there's still potential there. Like, it's very leftist. I'm sure there's a ton of people on Eau Claire's campus. Eau Claire is notorious for being like rainbow. Let's just say that. Very, very liberal and woke area of Wisconsin and college. But, you know, there's potential there with leftists who are critical of the Democratic Party and liberalism. You know, win those people over, give them theory, show them that they need to be fighting the class struggle, not the culture war. I would, if you guys want to do a tabling event at Eau Claire, please hit me up. I will absolutely go to Eau Claire and meet you, and we can talk to people. Have a coffee on me, comrade. Thank you, the only J. And you're a YouTube member, so you're giving me a whole lot more than coffee. I can buy a couple coffees with $15, or I can make like 15 coffees in my pour over machine in the kitchen. So thank you very much, comrade. Appreciate your support. By the way, yesterday the donations were flooding in because I got demonetized on one of my TikTok accounts. Thank you all for that. I appreciate you for that. But I will let you know we did get remonetized. I appealed it and we got reinstated. TikTok didn't explain to me why they took it down. They did apologize. They said, we're sorry we demonetized you, even though you didn't do anything wrong. So I appreciate their apology, but an explanation would be nice. So I'm not telling you guys to stop sending gifts and super chats, but just so you know, just so we're clear and I'm not scamming you, I do have my other TikTok account back that gets me about $200 to $500 a month. So yeah. Corvid, thank you, comrade, long-time supporter of the American Communist Party and the Midwestern Marx Institute. 10 memberships, that's huge, man. Thank you. Very generous donation. Shout out to whoever receives those memberships. And as I always say, once you get those memberships, make sure you take advantage of the perks. If you're a $10 member, you get access to both of Carlos's books. So that's a big value. That's much more value than $10. But we obviously, education is our first priority. So those who support us monthly, we want to get education in their hands. And then you get some other things. You get like some exclusive videos and some emotes or something. So, all right, enough of the Z in the chat, or I'm going to start muting people. I agree. Z. Yes, Z. But let's not flood the chat with Z only. Big value. Yes, yes. Just bought a Marx tier membership a couple minutes ago from this stream. Really looking forward to checking out Carlos's work. Hell yeah. That's badass. Thank you for doing that, comrade. And yeah, I think you'll really like them. I don't know which one I would start with. Probably the purity fetish, because it's so like why we need American Marxism is basically the stuff that we talk about. All right, you're getting muted for the Z's. You can come back in 5 minutes. The why we need American Marxism is basically just the basics of what we talk about here on the channel every single day, like applying Marxism to American conditions in a very simple sense, and talking about the Civil Rights Revolution and the American Revolution and the Civil War and how these were steps forward towards socialism in America's development, and how that development is contrary from the development of capitalism in Europe that Marx looked at, and how we need to have our own analysis, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm rambling. It's all that stuff. The purity fetish, though, is a diagnosis of the problems with the American left. And if you've been on the American left for a long time, that's the one I recommend. If you're new to the American left, maybe start with Why We Need American Marxism. If you've been on the American left for a while, read the purity fetish. It will answer all your questions about what's wrong with the left right now, our movement. I'm going to space these out. We got the supreme leader of Iran on the currency. We got my beloved dog Reggie, who passed away last year, his paw print. Got the books, and then we got the globe my mom gave me for Christmas. UWU comrade, let's go. We got all the Eau Claire comrades in here. What up, everybody? Thank you for the $2 super chat, Beta Virus. Buy my book when it comes out. Are you writing a book? PXE? I don't know if I can say your real name. I don't want to dox you. I will absolutely be buying that book. We would be willing to help you publish that book on Midwestern Marx. For those who don't know, I know PXE in real life quite well, and he's very brilliant. So that would be freaking awesome. I'm pulling up our first React for today. So I'm in the progress, short, around 60 pages. Nice. I'm pumped to read that. We will definitely help you in any way that you need. If you need editors, if you did want us to help you publish it, and short is good. You know, there's a reason so many theoretical pamphlets were like 30 to 60 pages, you know. Not everything needs to be Marx's Capital. And the shorter it is, the more people will read it. Trotsky is the man. Can't say I agree with that, brother. Okay, so we recently found out that our boy Jackson Hinkle narrowly avoided being bombed by Israel, straight up, no lie. So, you know, how many people have told us that Jackson is a Fed? Jackson is a Mossad agent working for the Israelis. Jackson is an agent of Tulsi Gabbard, blah, blah, blah. Well, if Jackson is secretly an imperialist, secretly a psyop, then why does Israel hate him so bad? Why does every prominent Zionist hate him? Why does the Israeli government hate him? And why did they want to literally end his life when he was in Venezuela? And I can get into that story for those who don't know. And now when he was in the Middle East. Okay, if Israel and the arms of imperialism want to end someone's life, that person probably isn't pro-imperialism. I mean, and even if you disagree with some of Jackson's like culture war takes or some of the things that he said in the past, look at the position that he occupies objectively within the system and within the empire. The empire hates him. The establishment hates him. In no way is he working for them or, you know, working in their interest. He's turning people, especially right-wing people, against the establishment and against empire. That is like the ruling class's worst nightmare. Jackson is the ruling class's worst nightmare, which is why they try to say over and over again that he's a Fed, because you have this good-looking white guy who knows how to talk, who looks like a conservative just like me, who's out here turning right-wing Americans into left-wing anti-imperialist Americans. And Israel hates him for it. Okay, so let's play this. I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick, but I will be right back to break it down. Oop, wrong button.
Look at what took place in southern Lebanon today, civilian areas in southern Lebanon. For the first time in 40 years, there was direct communication between Israel and Lebanon, between their governments in an official, formal, diplomatic setting. All right. Obviously, back channel, always been communications, always will be communications. But for the first time, we saw direct diplomatic communications, not about normalization or anything to that effect. It's about the ceasefire that is ongoing and in effect, kind of, right? Because right now, we are in phase 2 of the Lebanese ceasefire. Israel has violated the ceasefire upwards of 10,000 times, according to UNIFIL, which are the United Nations forces in Lebanon, interim forces in Lebanon, rather. And so they violated the ceasefire over 10,000 times, which is sick, disgusting, twisted, not surprising, but also very upsetting because Lebanon is an absolute...
This is true, by the way. I almost covered this yesterday. Since the ceasefire, Israel's bombings have just continued, and they just haven't been reported on as much by the media. I didn't even cover that because I feel like that's a given. Pretty much everyone in my audience already knows that they were going to perpetually continue bombing Arab countries. That's what we predicted would happen when the ceasefire was put in place. So nobody was surprised.
Beautiful country, beautiful people, maybe the best food I've ever had in my life. And I just would love to go back, but it's really not so safe. So this is what's going on. We're in phase 2 of the ceasefire. And I want to paint the picture for you because Trump has given a deadline that I guess Israel has in effect signed off and agreed upon, that Hezbollah needs to be disarmed by December 31st. Now, I don't really know how that's possible. I think the meat and potatoes of what they mean by that is that south of the Litani River, Hezbollah needs to be moved out to northern positions. They need to give up their sites to the Lebanese armed forces. Lebanese armed forces increased their troop presence by about 5,000 military personnel into the south of the Litani River. I believe 193 of the sites have already been given up to the Lebanese armed forces out of about 220, 230 sites. And a lot of their military equipment has been moved to the north of the Litani River. As for whether or not Israel has upheld their end of the ceasefire, I mean, obviously not with airstrikes. They have killed about 329 to 331 people inside of Lebanon since the ceasefire went into effect, about 130 of which were civilians, some of whom were aid workers. And they've destroyed countless buildings and infrastructure. So Israel has not agreed to their end of the ceasefire. Israel still maintains 5 strategic hilltop occupied bases on Lebanese territory. They have partially withdrawn from some areas, like, for example, they withdrew from Bin Jebel, I believe, but they have not withdrawn from the key strategic hilltop areas. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because December 31st is approaching. Yes, yesterday there were some talks, but all of the official statements from the Israeli government appear to indicate that they feel as though, despite the fact Lebanese armed forces are doing everything they can, despite the fact there's been a small reduction of UNIFIL as per schedule, despite the fact that Hezbollah has moved north of the Litani River along with their weapons and they're giving up their military sites south of the Litani River, despite the fact that they're basically doing everything they can, Joseph Aoun,
People in the chat are talking about Jackson being in Russia, being locked out from the United States. We don't need him to come back. We need to leave. What we need is for Jackson to come back on a tank during the glorious American Revolution.
President, the U.S. Zionist-controlled president, has said, the ceasefire phases are going to, they're going in effect. They're going on schedule. Israel is saying that they are probably going to do a war after December 31st on Lebanon once more. And I say, once more, what is happening right now? Is this not a war? Take a look at what took place in southern Lebanon today. My apologies, I don't know this exact city where this is, but you can see what Israel's doing today. Civilian areas in southern Lebanon. This is actually pretty minor in comparison to what we've seen over the span of certain days and certain weeks over the duration of the ceasefire. In some cases, we've seen absolutely, this is a massive bomb, but we've seen bombs that make this look.
Just the fact that they can call this a ceasefire. Yeah, we have a ceasefire, but videos of enormous bombs being dropped on these beautiful civilian areas
look like peanuts in comparison. We've seen strikes that make this look like nothing in comparison. Even strikes in Beirut, as I'm sure you've seen. So I don't have a whole lot of hope that this ceasefire is going to go be fully implemented. The idea that Israel's going to be able to wipe out Hezbollah, it's again insane. It's like the whole thing with the Palestinians. The Lebanese resistance is, by the way, even if not actively supported by the majority of Lebanese citizens, they are supported by a probably plurality of Lebanese citizens, and the majority of Lebanese citizens understand that, yes, even if we don't like the Lebanese resistance, we view them as a necessity to prevent Israeli occupation because they're the most armed, most capable, most combat-proven military force in Lebanon, far superior in all those capacities to the Lebanese armed forces or to what UNIFIL has ever been capable of or ever will be capable of. So this is what Israel is doing. I think that after December 31st, or maybe prior to, we will see renewed action in a very big way, much bigger than what we've been witnessing by Israel against Lebanon. Now, you might be wondering, oh, but Trump probably doesn't want the deal to fall apart. And if the deal is going somewhat well right now, then maybe he'll oppose this. Well, I just want to share this story with you because we just learned something that was rumored to have taken place back in February of 2025, that during Ortegas' visit, who's the U.S., I believe, Ortegas is the U.S. envoy to Lebanon. Yes. U.S. envoy Morgan Ortegas, one of the U.S. envoys to Lebanon, wanted Israel to bomb Said Hassan Nasrallah's funeral in central Beirut. So during her visit to Israel, right before.
So not only was Jackson at Nasrallah's funeral, but so was American citizen and chairman of the American Communist Party, Haz al-Din, as was Chris Halali, a teacher from Vermont. So they almost bombed 3 Americans for no reason. They almost decimated 3 of the leaders of our party. And if you think this is a joke, Israel flew jets over the funeral. Jackson and Haz and Chris have videos of the jets flying over them extremely low as a threat. And they were actually considering bombing them. They would have killed 3 American citizens and the leaders of our party. So please tell me more about how our party is a bunch of feds or is a bunch of people who are working for the empire when the empire tried to bomb 3 of our leaders. The empire was trying to kill 3 of our leaders because they were overseas supporting the resistance against imperialism in practice on the ground. But we're the feds. We're the Mossad agents. Are you fucking kidding me? The Mossad wants to kill us. They want us dead.
For the funeral of the former Lebanese resistance leader's funeral, U.S. envoy Morgan Ortega suggested that Israeli officials bomb the ceremony at the Sports City Stadium, claiming it would target resistance leaders. Okay, this is according to Israeli Channel 14. Take a listen. She usually deals with the Lebanon file. That's her file, he says.
I'm glad he didn't make us or force us to listen to some dude speaking in Hebrew.
Channel 14, she's also aggressively towards Hezbollah, which is obviously positive from our point of view. I think that today we can say that she came here to Israel ahead of Nasrallah's funeral, and during the discussions in Israel, she was the one who suggested attacking the stadium in order to eliminate Hezbollah's leader. She oversaw the funeral. During the funeral, ultimately, Israel decided not to do it. So we will have to wait for the prime minister's statement.
I wonder if Israel didn't do it because Jackson and Chris and Haz were there, because they knew they would be bombing 3 American citizens. I don't know how many other Americans were there, but it couldn't have been many. You know, which is part of the reason that other countries like when Americans come and visit. It looks good for them. You know, Americans get to actually see the reality on the ground outside of the propaganda narratives in the media. But also it provides protection because the U.S. is afraid to bomb, and in Israel are afraid to bomb American citizens because that would become a huge controversy here in the U.S. But thank God they didn't, because how bad would that have been for our party?
So this is the Israelis coming out and saying, you know, we didn't even decide to bomb at the funeral, but the U.S. wanted us to, like, really bad. They were pressuring us to do it before.
This is what I always think of that drone strike where Obama killed the American citizen, but that also became like his biggest controversy. He drone striked so many people unlawfully, but the only time it really became a big controversy was when he did it to an American citizen.
Or during and after the funeral, as there was, I think, 1 million or 2 million people there. By the way, the Israeli Air Force did a flyover, very low flyover, to intimidate the crowd at the funeral. Not once, but twice, with American F-16 fighter jets. So they're using our taxpayer dollars to act all big and scary. They're using our fighter jets to act all big and scary, flexing their muscles when they have to use Big Brother's weapons to even flex any muscle at all.
Using our weapons to threaten our citizens. Using American weapons to threaten Americans because they're against genocide. And a genocide that's funded with our taxes.
But I think this goes to show what we can probably expect in Lebanon in the near future. The U.S. is currently building the single largest embassy that they possess anywhere in the world in Lebanon. Lebanon is a...
So, yeah. Yeah, tell me more about how Jackson's a Fed. He's a Fed that the Israeli government wants to bomb. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense if you're brain dead. Jackson is viral enough that it would have been a larger controversy. Effed up that popularity is looked at this way, but it's true. Yeah, no, that's totally true. People have told me that since the beginning, that the more popular you get, the more safe you are, because the ruling class is more scared to take you out, versus if you're, unpopular, they can take you out and it doesn't make much of a stink. That doesn't mean they can't take out people who are popular, or that they never have, but yeah, it does provide you with a little bit of safety, just a little bit. One sec. Trying to find something for you guys. That's not it. Okay. I'm going to grab some water real quick because I forgot to grab some for myself. So in the meantime, enjoy this video of me wrestling a random guy. I'll be back in like 5 seconds. Am I winning? What an animal. Congrats. Oh, thank you. Thank you. He's living his best life surrounded by Russian women. Only his girlfriend, of course. I can't remember how this match went. I'm pretty sure it was their backup. Threw the poor kid out there. Oh, this was the match where I choked him out by spinning in a circle repeatedly. Yeah. I remember him gargling so bad here because I had my arm right on his throat. He did a good job of defending, actually. Usually I get this move much faster than here. But you can see that he's completely choked out. Sorry, buddy. Getting points here. Oh, he shouldn't have given me that. What an idiot. He walked right into it, punched the arm, kicked the legs out. Yeah, it's probably the end of the match. Usually don't let him out of there. Balls to face. Guys from Co are watching. Go me. I won. Good evening. What up? What up? Jan or Marab? I got Marab for sure. I think that's the UFC main event tonight. I think Marab gasses him out and wins. Poor random guy. I never get notifications for Midwest Marks. A lot of people don't. Yeah, there's something wrong with our notifications for sure. There's some intense censorship going on TikTok and YouTube right now. Our Facebook and Instagram videos are blowing up, but there's some serious censorship and shadow banning on YouTube and TikTok, I've noticed. So, balls to face. Pretty intense. How'd you get into wrestling, Eddie? My dad was a wrestling coach, so I've been around it my entire life. Do you guys have a rear naked choke? Not really, because wrestling's not about choking, but you can come across their throat to try and put them over to their back. Yeah. Hit the bell. Saw you live on Twitter. That's so weird. Yeah, I mean weird, but not surprising. Some people get notifications, but others don't. When is the new politics of every country coming? Thank you, Didark, for the $2 super chat. Yeah, I've been meaning to make the next episode of that. I think my last one was Ukraine, and that took a lot of time. But yeah, I'll move on again here soon. That series definitely will be finished at some point. I want to break down the politics of every country. Okay. So let's get to the main event then. I think you're all familiar with the Infographics show, a YouTube history channel, one of these very well-produced, cartoonish, oversimplified history channels that often distort history and give the bourgeois framing of events, which is never the accurate framing, of course. How do I increase the playback speed here? What is this? What is this? What the hell? That's weird. I guess we're listening at 1%
On June 25th.
But yeah, this was their video about the Korean War. I've debunked their videos about Mao and Stalin in the past. I didn't know they had one on Korea. Otherwise, I would have talked about it already. But I was excited. My mouth was watering when I saw this video. It's like they put it on a silver platter for me just to knock down. The DPRK and the Korean War are a subject that I know a lot about compared to other subjects. So it should be interesting to scrub through this and see what they get right and see what they get wrong. I have not watched this yet, so I'm blind watching it with all of you. I just know that the Infographics channel is going to tell some lies. Horrid channel. Yeah, it is pretty bad. It is potentially funded by some of these channels like Kings and Generals, which we did a whole series on, are literally funded by the NED and have their scripts being written for them by State Department officials, and get, corporate funding. I don't know if that's the case with Infographics or not, but some of these channels are, very closely tied to the U.S. State Department. Would you recommend college or union for young people? Depends. If you want to do sports, I would say you got to go to college, obviously. But if you don't want to get trapped in debt and all you care about is organizing the working class, then I would just do the union and educate yourself by reading theory and reading books. But yeah, thank you for the 5, Iowa worker. If you message me personally, I can give you more advice on your personal situation and what you should do. I know we have each other on a few platforms, so shoot me a DM. All right, let's get into it.
On June 25th, 1950, 75,000 soldiers from the North Korean People's Army rushed across the 38th parallel, a boundary drawn up between the United States and the Soviet Union, which separates.
So they've already made a mistake here. This is the bourgeois framing of this conflict. The bourgeois framing of this conflict is that it began when the North invaded the South. And they completely ignore all of the history before that. And what's so crazy about framing the conflict in this way is that Korea wasn't divided for hundreds and hundreds of years. It was one united country, one united peninsula, and nobody could have even imagined there being a divided Korea. And it was only when the U.S. went to the UN and manufactured a voting plan that they were able to split the country in half. And it wasn't that the Soviet Union, was just all on board with this. They were still backing the communist forces in the North, who looked like they were going to sweep through and unify the entire country until the U.S. began their bombing campaign. But we'll get into that later. But this conflict should not be, anybody who frames the conflict or gives the history of the conflict beginning with the peninsula already divided is doing a disservice. You have to immediately start before the peninsula was divided. Otherwise, you frame this like an invasion of the South from the North, which is not what it was at all. It was the Korean communists fighting back against the U.S. occupation and a puppet dictatorship. Oh my gosh, enough of this. You're banned.
Separated Korea into North and South, with the North communist and firmly aligned with the Soviet Union, and the South democratic and aligned with the United States.
Democratic. The South was democratic. They had a fascist dictatorship. Even liberals don't try to claim that the Syngam-Rhee regime was democratic. The U.S. installed a fascist dictatorship that committed some of the worst massacres in human history against anybody who disagreed with them or who sided with the North. Nobody, even liberal historians, argues that Syngam-Rhee's government that the U.S. installed in the South was democratic. Holy shit.
1 month later, the United States would enter the war, anxious to achieve a quick armistice with the North out of fear of dragging in the Soviet Union or China and launching World War II.
The Soviet Union and China were already involved. Mao had like a relative or a son who was killed in this war. They were already deeply involved, and the U.S. is the one who escalated this war and even allowed it to happen in the first place. Korea would have just become communist if it weren't for the U.S. getting involved and backing the right-wing reactionary forces. And then when it looked like those forces were going to lose was when the U.S. began their bombing campaign and killed 20% of the population.
3. But how did a war that would last to this day begin? Hello and welcome.
That's the first correct thing that they've said. The war has indeed lasted until this day. The Korean people see themselves as still being at war. After killing 20% of their population, the U.S. put them under the second most stringent sanction regime on earth and tried to strangle them. So they're absolutely still at war with the U.S.
Welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're telling the story of the Korean War. Korea was seized as part of the Japanese Empire early on in the 20th century. After a stunning defeat of Russia, the world was forced to accept that Japan was a new world power, and Japan itself was eager to add to its territories. Unfortunately for the people of Korea, this meant that the Japanese army would occupy the nation until the end of World War II. Upon Japan's defeat, however...
And they don't even talk about the occupation at all. This was one of the most brutal occupations in human history. The Japanese made the Germans look chill in comparison. They were conducting awful CIA, MK Ultra style experiments on the Korean people, like seeing how much pain someone can endure before they pass away, that kind of stuff. Using Korean women as comfort women for Japanese men, committing mass sexual assault. One of the most horrific occupations in human history that the Korean people fought against valiantly, and that Kim Il-sung fought against valiantly, which is just completely left out. The sexual abuse and murder and exploitation of these people for decades is just left out of the story. Oh, Japan occupied them. Here's some silly music in the background.
However, something needed to be done about its former imperial holdings.
Something needed to be done about Japan's former imperial holdings. Something needed to be done. Yeah, how about we just give them to the people who actually live there? How about we just give Korea to the Koreans? Does something really need to be done about it? By who? By the U.S.? They need to go in and take Japan's former colonies for themselves? How about you let the Koreans govern Korea? What a concept that the Western Anglo brain can't even wrap their minds around.
Part of its unconditional surrender, Japan was forced to recall its armies in Asia back to its home island, and to give up most of its overseas territories. Yet, while
Get wrecked by base Chinese and Korean communists.
Manchuria would be returned to the Chinese, nobody had any idea about what to do with Korea.
Nobody had any idea. Except for the communists, whose whole idea was to give it to Korea, to give it to the Koreans. What do you mean no one had any idea what to do? It doesn't belong to anybody but the Koreans. This just shows how sick and twisted like Western brains have become and how stupid we've been made from propaganda that we just assume that some giant world power needs to control Korea. That when Japan gave them up, somebody else needs to come in and start raping and killing them. How about you just let the Koreans handle it, since it's their country? That's not even an option for Western brains. Something needs to be done. Gee,
Ultimately, the nation was divided along the 38th parallel, and in a bid to seek to...
How'd that happen? How'd that happen? How was the country divided along the 38th parallel? Who pushed for that? Who manipulated a voting plan to divide the country in half that most of the population didn't even participate in? It was the United States. They manufactured the division of the country in half so they could turn the South into a puppet government, because it looked like the entire country was going to turn communist. And they all supported China and the Soviet Union and the Communist Party in Korea. They just act like the country randomly just split in half. Like the country wasn't moving towards communism at the time, not forcing, but prompting the US to create this bullshit voting plan at the UN to artificially divide the country in half.
Pacify the Soviet Union, Soviet forces were allowed to take control of the North, and the Americans would take control of the South. No,
they didn't take control of the North. It wasn't a Soviet occupation. They were backing Kim Il-sung and the Korean Workers' Party. I don't know what it was called at the time, but there were tons of anti-colonial liberation forces in Korea who were ready to create their own Korean government. There were tons of Korean forces ready to take over the state, and that's who Russia wanted to give it to. But the US couldn't accept that. The US couldn't accept the fact that Koreans wanted to be a communist country, allied with the Soviet Union. So they manufactured the voting plan.
Nobody, by the way, had bothered to ask the Koreans what they themselves wanted. By 19...
Thank you. Thank you, Infographics. Thank you for at least fucking saying that. Thank you for at least admitting no one bothered to ask the Koreans, except they're talking about the Soviet Union, who were trying to give the Koreans sovereignty, who were just backing the most popular political party in Korea at the time. Whereas the US was backing a wildly unpopular dictator, had to artificially divide the country in half in order to make sure that he actually had territory legally. And then when it looked like the North and the communists who were actually popular were going to take all of that territory, the US bombed them and killed 20% of their population and leveled every building over 2 stories tall. That's what happened. And then the country was left divided in half.
1950, the South was controlled by anti-communist dictator Syngman, which the U.S.
I thought you said they're a democracy. Maybe he was talking about Korea today, but even still, South Korea today is not a democracy.
Very reluctantly supported. The North, however, was enthusiastically supported by the Soviet Union, who had installed Kim Il-sung as its leader.
The U.S. reluctantly supported Syngman Rhee. They didn't want to. They just had to. They were forced to. If they wanted to subvert democracy and install a puppet dictatorship, they had to. They just had to back this guy and massacre brutally all of his opposition. They were forced to.
Both men wanted to reunify Korea under their own rule, and border skirmishes between the two nations were common, with almost 10,000 troops killed in battle before the war officially began. Then came the major offensive from the North in the summer of 1950 for the United.
And guess what? Their country was artificially divided by the U.S. The U.S. installed a puppet regime in the South that was murdering communists and murdering left-wingers. And nobody supported Syngman Rhee and the U.S. puppet dictatorship because it was a U.S. puppet dictatorship. So even if the people weren't hardcore communists, they still supported Kim Il-sung and the Soviet-backed communist forces over the U.S.-backed fascist forces, which is what Syngman Rhee was. He was like a Korean supremacist fascist who murdered his enemies. So because of that, the North won. The North swept through the country because they had popular support. Nobody wanted to fight for Syngman Rhee and the US-backed dictatorship. So after the Korean people sided with the North and sided with the communists, and the communists took the whole country and ousted the US occupiers, or moved to oust the US occupiers, that's when the US started bombing them to smithereens and pushed them back to the North and created a stalemate, which is where we're still at today.
States, the conflict was not a border dispute between two rival nations, but rather part of a larger and growing struggle between the forces of communism and democracy. The United States considered
the forces of communism versus the forces of capitalist imperialism. The forces of communism and democracy against the forces of capitalism and dictatorship, more accurately.
Interference and impossibility, and a secret National Security Council report even recommended that the United States use military force to contain communist expansionism anywhere in the world, regardless of the intrinsic strategic or economic value of the lands in question. For the US, the die was cast, and what was quickly seen as a war of aggression backed by the Soviet Union was met with US.
A war of aggression? A war of aggression? Please explain to me how the Korean people can be aggressors against Korea. How can the Korean people creating their own government be considered an act of aggression against who? Themselves?
Troops. President Harry Truman would go on to say, "If we let Korea down, the Soviets will keep right on going and swallow up one place after another." This anti-communist
The same thing we hear about Russia and Ukraine today. If we don't murder all these people and send all of our tax dollars over to another country that's not even close to us, then Russia's going to seize all of Europe. Isn't it amazing how the propaganda hasn't even evolved over the years? They're still repeating the same old bullshit. If we let the Koreans choose their own government, soon Russia will control Australia too.
sentiment would in later years lead to the domino effect theory, which claimed that if one nation was allowed to fall to communism, it would pave the way for many others to do the same. While
Based.
the anti-communist fervor of the United States would come to be derided by later generations, the truth is that the Soviet Union very much wanted a unified communist Korea, also believing that an ultimate confrontation between democracy and communism was inevitable. And if that fight was to come, then the only way for any side to survive was to
It is inevitable. Look at how the U.S. was bringing troops to their doorstep. Look at the extent that the U.S. went to and how many people they murdered just to stop countries from choosing their own government, just to stop them from having democracy. Based on the U.S.'s actions, you see that it is inevitable, because anytime a country tries to govern themselves, anytime a country tries to take control of its own resources, U.S. bombs and U.S. troops are coming shortly after.
have the most allies. In short, everyone believed that World War III was inevitable. Despite the intervention of the United States and its allies, the war initially went very badly for the Democratic forces. North Korean forces were backed with Soviet equipment and had received
It wasn't because they had Soviet equipment. Singham Reeves' forces had American equipment the whole time. You're such liars. The Soviets didn't have as, good of equipment as the Americans either. And the Americans were funding the Southern forces the whole time. I don't even want to call them the Southern forces, because most people in Southern Korea didn't support them. They didn't support Singham Rhee because he was a US-backed fascist dictator who murdered them. So the North wasn't winning because they had these, magical Soviet weapons that could fire 100 bullets at once or whatever. Or these like skull-seeking bullets that the Soviets gave them. They were winning because they had the support of the people. Because the Korean people in the North and the South supported them and saw how the communists sacrificed themselves in the struggle against the Japanese colonizers. And they had won the people's trust. Meanwhile, you had this US-backed fascist dictator just murdering people in the streets, filling the streets with blood. Yeah, obviously they didn't want to, lay down their lives and die for that guy. They didn't want to lay down their lives and die for the U.S. empire. So the North just dominated. They crushed. And that's when the U.S. sent troops in to just, straight up occupy the country, not even covertly anymore. We're just going to murder your people and take over half of your peninsula.
extensive training from Soviet military advisors. In fact, many of North Korea's operations were being actively planned by Soviet generals, who put their vast experience combating the Japanese in Manchuria and the Germans in Eastern Europe to great effect. North Korean forces were numerous, well-disciplined, well-equipped, and had high morale. By contrast, South Korean forces had not received much training and suffered from very poor morale.
Why's that, Infographics? Why did the South Korean forces have poor morale? Was it because the people in Korea didn't actually like them? Was it because they weren't actually democratic, as you say, and they were US-backed puppet forces who had no reason to actually fight? Versus the communist forces were the ones fighting for their country's freedom and sovereignty and independence? You think that has anything to do with the morale? Or was it just that they didn't receive enough training? Oh yeah, if these people received more training, they would have wanted to sacrifice their lives to help the U.S. take over their own country. That's what it was. They just needed a few more lessons, a few more goes in the combat simulator.
U.S. soldiers would often find their South Korean allies fleeing from battle at the slightest provocation. And
Why? Why were the South Koreans fleeing right away? Why were the North Koreans willing to die while the South Koreans would run away right away. Because they didn't actually care. They weren't actually fighting for anything. The communists were fighting for their independence, their sovereignty, their freedom. The Southerners were just US-backed puppets who weren't fighting for shit, who were fighting for their own country to be colonized once again, just as it was by Japan.
Desertion was a common problem for South Korean military leaders. While the US was initially supposed to supplement South Korean forces and fight a defensive battle to push the North out of the South, they soon found themselves carrying the brunt of the battle. The extreme heat.
The poor US. The poor US. They were trying to back democracy in this country, but it didn't have any support from the people. The democracy that they were backing didn't have any democratic support, so they had to send in the troops for democracy, to force democracy on them. It's fucking insane, dude, how they reframe history. Instead of just telling the truth, yeah, the people supported the North, so the US started bombing them and just sent their own troops in because they couldn't get the Koreans to fight for them. Instead of saying that, it's like, you know, they had lower morale because they didn't receive enough training. The poor United States had to go in and kill 20% of their population for democracy.
Also worked against the American soldiers, who suffered from logistic and supply problems and were often forced to refill their drinking canteens from rice paddies, which had been fertilized with human waste. This led to outbreaks of disease and illness, which further decreased U.S. strength.
So not only did they not have any support, but they were also drinking poop.
The U.S. desperately needed to relieve pressure on its forces, and it was decided that an amphibious invasion behind North Korean forces would be launched. The plan...
You know what they could have done to relieve pressure on the forces in Korea? They could have left Korea. They could have left. But instead, they decided to kill 20% of their population with bombs and send Americans to fight and die there.
Was extremely risky. If the landings went poorly, then American forces would be destroyed on the beaches, overwhelmed by superior North Korean firepower. Yet if it was successful, then North Korea forces would be cut off from their supply lines and forced to fight on two fronts at the same time. Kim Il-sung, leader of North Korea, was completely aware of the vulnerability of his forces to being flanked by landings at his rear. And
it's crazy that they won. Like, yes, they got beat back and they had to give the South to the US occupiers. But still, the North still exists. They weren't completely defeated. They fought a war on two fronts against the US-backed forces in the South and against the US themselves, the largest, most powerful empire on Earth. And they were still able to maintain their independence and sovereignty. It's insane.
Even received some intel from the Soviets that American landings at Incheon were possible. Yet Kim Il-sung did not believe that the Americans would attempt such a landing, as Incheon's beaches were notoriously treacherous and difficult terrain, and its dangerous tides only afforded a few hours of safety for landing craft. On September 15th, 40,000 American troops and 8,600 South Korean troops forced a landing at Incheon.
Listen to the triumphant music in the background. Just then, these American troops, these heroes, stormed into Korea and killed and raped their people and seized it for American bankers. For democracy, what heroes!
Fully 100 miles behind the North's lines. The attack was a complete surprise to the North, and the landing force met with relatively light resistance. From the east, American tank battalions rushed to encircle the North Korean forces, threatening to trap the bulk of the North Korean army in the south. North Korean forces rapidly retreated back to Seoul, the South's capital, which they had seized early on in the war. A vicious battle.
And you got to keep in mind, this was the first U.S. war after World War II as well. So nobody knew that the U.S. was this psychopathic yet, right? The Koreans didn't know that the U.S. was willing to bomb their country to smithereens and sacrifice young American lives just to control a peninsula on the other side of the world, right? Nobody knew that the U.S. was this psychotic and this bloodthirsty and this dead set on maintaining their position as the world's dominant empire and trying to control the entire world. So they didn't know that the U.S. would act in this disgusting manner. It would have been pretty impossible to know that the U.S. was going to go all the way over to Asia and send their own people to die in a war to control an Asian peninsula. So yeah, I'm sure it did catch them off guard. It's hard to imagine anyone being as evil and disgusting as the U.S. empire has become. Now it's no surprise to us. It's like, of course they did. And then they invaded Vietnam right after.
battle leveled much of Seoul and saw the North's forces put in full retreat, with only 30,000 North Korean soldiers making it back to the north. The way to Pyongyang was now clear, and an end to the war was in sight. Back in the Soviet Union, Stalin berated several of his military commanders for the poor performance of the North Korean military.
Based. He went after his own commanders for their failure to help them because he was the man of steel and he enforced discipline.
And held them personally responsible. Some of them would not survive their failures. President Truman, however, warned that advances into North Korea should be careful not to provoke China, as he feared that it would lead to China's entry into the war and prompt the Soviets to initiate attacks in Europe, launching the much-feared democracy versus communism World War III. China's Mao Zedong had in fact warned the UN that in the case of safeguarding Chinese national security, they would intervene if necessary.
Based. This was the best time in world history. Before the Sino-Soviet split, when China and the Soviets were like, you know what, why don't you get the fuck out of here? You already killed 20% of the people in this peninsula. Why don't you piss off before we get involved, motherfucker? That's what I'd like to see modern China say about Venezuela, but I get why they don't.
Against UN forces in Korea. American General Douglas MacArthur, commander of the UN forces in Korea, however, was sure that China...
This is the guy who admitted that they killed 20% of the Korean population. And General Douglas MacArthur said that American pilots were complaining to him that there were no more targets left to bomb, that they had already disintegrated every building in Korea and there was nothing left to hit, which gives you an idea of the scale of devastation that the U.S. wrought upon this peninsula just to install a fascist puppet dictator.
And it wouldn't dare risk full-out war against the US, especially given the fact that the nation still lacked any serious military hardware and relied on mass infantry formations. He also resented what he thought of as President Truman's appeasement of the Chinese. And thus, while President Truman tried to prevent war with the Chinese...
Maybe that was Curtis LeMay, actually. Some of the information comes from MacArthur, and some of it comes from Curtis Bombs Away LeMay, who was also involved with this war. So actually, it might have been LeMay who said 20% of the population and that people were complaining. One of those two bloodthirsty bombs away generals.
General MacArthur actively tried to provoke it. Unbeknownst to MacArthur, he was about to get his wish, as for weeks now, Chinese military forces had been moving into North Korea, while UN forces had encountered various Chinese military units.
I was going to say, I was like, maybe this is when China got involved, but no, they said they had already encountered Chinese units. I thought so. I thought China was giving them tacit support the whole time, as were the Soviets. But this must be when they got fully involved.
These were small in size and thought to be nothing more than volunteers. Thus, General MacArthur ignored intelligence that said a growing...
they were volunteer units, probably. That makes sense.
Chinese force was massing in the mountains, believing that any Chinese in North Korea were volunteer fighters and not actual troops. Meanwhile, Stalin had been secretly communicating with Mao Zedong, telling him,
Based, how I wish we could have this today. It's okay. It's okay. Russia and China are becoming buddies again. It's okay. We're going to be back. USSR 2.0 soon.
And to send several infantry divisions into North Korea, but warning that Soviet forces would not intercede in the fight. Diplomatic discussions between Mao and Stalin led to Stalin agreeing to lend some material support, but no combat troops, and that he would offer the support of the Soviet Air Force, but only over Chinese airspace. This would be of little use to the Chinese forces, as none of the fighting was taking place in China itself. Still, some Soviet pilots did fly missions against UN forces, though they were careful to always remain near the Chinese border in case they were shot down.
I was going to say, I thought the Soviets did send troops eventually, so yeah, they did.
Now, China immediately supplemented its forces in North Korea with a force of 200,000 troops, which incredibly completely evaded detection by UN aerial reconnaissance.
Haha, get wrecked by the Chinese UN.
This was achieved by marching only at nighttime and setting up elaborate camouflage while resting during the day.
Yet the US thinks they can take China in a war.
Strict discipline was enforced, and soldiers were to immediately duck for cover and remain motionless if any aircraft were spotted overhead. Chinese officers were authorized to shoot any security violators, and the measures, while draconian, allowed 3 divisions of Chinese infantry to completely surprise South Korean and UN.
I wonder if anyone actually got shot. I wonder. It's like an aircraft overhead, like pow.
forces. Deep in North Korea, Chinese forces routed a South Korean army and then completely encircled the US's 8th Cavalry Regiment, launching attacks from the north, northwest, and west. UN forces were forced to
At least they're playing the triumphant music for the North and the Chinese with their heroic efforts to kick the US out of the northern part of Korea.
retreat. But despite the huge success of their attack, the Chinese mysteriously retreated to mountain hideouts instead of pushing the attack and capitalizing on their victory.
Yeah, Kim Il-sung wanted them to take the whole peninsula, and the Soviets and the Chinese were like, you know what? We don't want to fight World War III right now. And, you know, I get it. I get the real politic of that. I appreciate them for helping the DPRK to survive in the first place. But yeah, maybe they should have kept going. Maybe they should have taken the South too. I don't know if it would have been that hard. I mean, they would have got bombed by the U.S., but the U.S. was already ready to get out and pivot to Vietnam at that point.
Because of the sudden withdrawal, though, UN command did not believe that China had truly committed to the war, and thus continued to push north. This would result in another series of deadly Chinese ambushes.
They just never stopped. They just kept pressing China and kept getting wrecked. Notice how China and the Soviet Union were like, oh, we don't want to start World War III. We won't keep pressing south. Versus the U.S. just kept pressing north. They have no freaking off switch. It's like, take. It's a country of, like, greedy retards.
Famous being the Battle of
Our government, anyway, not the rest of us.
Reservoir, in which 30,000 UN troops, mostly Americans from the US's X-Corps, were surrounded by 120,000 Chinese troops. The Chinese were ordered to
Yeah, there were, I'm sure they won't talk about this in the video, but there were a lot of US troops who defected to the DPRK because they were so disgusted at what our country was doing. And they had so much admiration for the people of Korea and that they were willing to lay down their lives to prevent their country from being occupied by foreigners.
Completely destroy UN forces. However, for 17 days, UN forces held their own under a brutal wintertime assault. Eventually, the encircled forces were able to break through the Chinese lines, and with the aid of American Marines and the US Army's Task Force Faith, were able to retreat. The battle would see 1,000 UN soldiers killed, with 20,000 Chinese killed, mostly due to the superior equipment and tactics of the Americans and their British and South Korean allies. The battle, however,
who knows how true those numbers are, especially back then when it was much harder to count the dead. I'm sure the US inflated those numbers even more back then. They do the same thing today with Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is winning. Trust us, bro.
Marked the end of offensive operations in North Korea. With China fully committed, President Truman desperately wanted to avoid a third world war, and thus ordered UN forces to move back to the...
Yeah, it's got, like, he just said the U.S. walked into an ambush. So they walked into an ambush of hidden Chinese soldiers and somehow managed to take all of them out and only lose a couple. Sounds like some propaganda that they gave to American citizens to justify continuing the war effort by downplaying the amount of Americans who were being killed over there.
38th parallel. As negotiations took place, fighting continued along the 38th parallel until finally, after 2 years of negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. A ceasefire, which lasts to this day, was immediately put into effect, but a satisfactory...
That's how they portray the country today. Bunch of degenerates getting drunk to forget the fact that they're drowning in debt while they wait for their chance to go on Squid Game so they can escape capitalism. Versus a bunch of disciplined and honorable people who live not for themselves, but for the collective. That's the difference.
Immediately put into effect, but a satisfactory end to the Korean War was never achieved. Sadly, hostilities between North and South are still at an all-time high.
It was, the Chinese did take a lot of casualties. Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I just think the numbers are probably smudged. I know they're definitely smudged. I don't doubt that the Chinese made great sacrifices to win. But yeah, that's a good point.
And the continued backing of Russia and China allow North Korea, impoverished as it is, to survive.
Less so than the Chinese numbers being downplayed. I think the numbers of Americans killed was more so than the Chinese numbers being overstated. I think the number of Americans killed was probably downplayed, just like they do in Ukraine, talking about, how many Russians have been killed as compared to Ukrainians. It's always downplaying the number of Ukrainians killed so Americans won't feel bad and think, why are we still funding this, sending these people to their death? But yeah, the Chinese surely made great sacrifices to defend their neighbors in Korea, and it's proven to be worth it. The DPRK is still around today, still playing this anti-imperialist role. They sent troops to Russia to help with the fight against NATO and Ukraine. They're in the mix. The DPRK is a small country, but they're definitely in the mix when it comes to geopolitics. So yeah, infographics is terrible. It's nefarious too, because it pretends to be this objective, straightforward, down the middle. Here's a simplified version of history to show your kids. But it's complete and total propaganda. The framing is completely off. And it was, think about all these wars that the U.S. got into at this time after World War II. I mean, you have the coups in Guatemala and Iran, right? They couped Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala and Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran. But then they also waged the Korean War. What happened? Well, after World War II, a lot of the imperialist powers lost control of their colonies because all of their troops and resources were spent fighting other Europeans or the Japanese or whatever. So the Japanese lost their control of Korea. What does the U.S. do? They launch a war in Korea to try to take it as a colony of their own. Now in Vietnam, the French and the Japanese lose their control of Indochina. First the French, who controlled Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia, and then they got kicked out after they got conquered by Germany and stuff. And in come the Japanese to try and take it as a colony of their own. When they fail, in comes the U.S. The Vietnamese had to fight off 3 invading imperialist armies in a row. So really, it was the U.S. trying to snatch up all of these colonies after World War II as colonies of their own. That's why it's so ridiculous when I hear infographics say, like, what was to be done with Japan's former colonies? It's like, just let them have independence. That doesn't mean they have to be our colonies now. But that's the way that the U.S. ruling class thinks, of course, because they see the world as a big chessboard to be exploited for profit. So, yeah, there's the real history of the Korean War as compared to the infographics nonsense history. Requirements for joining ACP, you got to be 18, and we have an interview process and a little quiz, like 10-point quiz that you got to take. But yeah, mainly you just got to prove yourself. You'll start off as a reserve member and work your way up to cadre by doing good work. Yeah, check us out at acp.us. We would love to have you, comrade. We need more. We need more people putting in good work on the ground. Our country needs it badly. Is it true Bibles are not allowed in the DPRK, or is that BS? I have no idea. I have no clue. I know that it used to be called the Jerusalem of the East because it had so many Christian churches. And then the U.S. destroyed them all in the war. No, you can have Bibles. Yeah, you can have Bibles. The state officially sanctions Christianity as a religion. They just don't allow, like, cults. They don't allow, like, like the Falun Gong in China. They don't allow these, like, right-wing U.S.-backed government cults that the U.S. can funnel money to in the name of religious freedom, which is what the Falun Gong is in China. So, but yeah, people have Bibles and they have lots of Christian churches and they have Christians, and it's officially sanctioned by the government. So yeah, that's BS. Thank you for the 2, Didark. I did ban that guy. It's the biggest religion at 13% of the population, yeah. And there's a long history of Christian missionaries in Korea. Obviously, everything got crazy after the war because so many people were murdered, and so many of the churches were hit by bombs. But there's a long history of Christianity in Korea because they had so many missionaries there. Aren't cults extremely popular in South Korea, though? Thank you, Corvid, for being a member for 13 months. Appreciate you, brother. Longtime supporter. Yes, extremely popular. In fact, if you visit Korea, you can join a cult within like a day, and they'll actually try to lure you into their cults. They'll, you know, offer you something for free, some free event, and it's just like a recruiting event where they try to get you in their cult. It's huge. There's so many cults in South Korea, which, yes, I'm sure that's what the North is trying to avoid. Thank you, Phil, for the 10. Appreciate you, brother. Super chat's rolling in today. Appreciate you guys. That's where all of our funding comes from, you, the viewer. No corporate donors over here. Oh, I got a little bit of energy left. Let's check out this video. This looks like a great one. What's it called? The Bizarre World of North Korean Influencers. Could it be any more bizarre than the world of American influencers, where we have people like Neon and people like Jack Doherty and people like Wes Watson? You want to talk about a bizarre world? That Israeli alpha male guy, King Azule, y'all know who I'm talking about? It doesn't get much more bizarre than that. The Western world definitely takes the cake with the most bizarre-ass influencers.
This is Song A. She's an influencer. She tells stories about her everyday life, using an over-the-top British accent.
Hello, everyone.
Sometimes she goes hiking.
Nice to see you again.
Sometimes she cooks.
I think that something's missing.
All pretty normal. But there's one thing that makes Song A stand out. She's from North Korea.
What the fuck? What did I just watch? This is a totally normal girl who cooks and cleans and lives her day-to-day life. And she's just totally normal, and everything about her is normal. But she's from North Korea. And there can be no normal people in North Korea. You're telling me people do normal activities? Human activities in North Korea? Everything about the North Korean people is just normal. They're just human beings like us, except they're North Korean, which means they're not. Because of something I read about them in People magazine when I was checking out at the Dollar General.
Can you guess where I am right now? Everything is under control as it used to be, and everyone is just fine.
When we getting a Palantir sponsorship? I'm not sure. I think Joe Rogan's going to get that sponsorship. I'm pretty sure they're turning Joe Rogan's head into the actual Palantir stone that they can see. Peter Thiel will just rub his head and see the future.
This all seems a bit odd.
This all seems a bit odd. Yeah, that is odd. You know, I didn't think that other countries could have normal people who like the same things as me. Right? Other countries are aliens, especially countries that the U.S. doesn't like. They don't do normal things. They just pray to Kim Jong-un all day. They don't cook. They don't clean. They don't go to school. You know, they just bow down to the altar of Kim Jong-un all day, every day. Like, it's so racist, too. Like, only Americans are normal. You know, these other countries, when they do normal things, we're going to act like we're shocked. Like, yeah, they're human beings, buddy. They cook and they clean and they go to school. That's what human beings do in the 21st century in any country. What do you think? The North Koreans are aliens?
Press the bell. I gotta go. I come in spring to look at the flowers, so cheer up.
And she is by no means the only North Korean influencer.
Good morning.
Come visit North Korea.
Hi, everyone.
All right, I don't know about you guys, but from what I've seen, these influencers are better than any of ours in America. They're just normal. They're showing you day-to-day lives. They're doing healthy activities like eating and jogging and exploring the city and showing you what North Korea is actually like outside of the Western propaganda framing. It's a hell of a lot better than Johnny Somali or Wes Watson. I mean, I like the Trend Twins, but this is probably a better influence on people than the Trend Twins or these American influencers.
And how embarrassing.
What is going on here?
What is going on here? Am I the only one who's like mind blown by how stupid this is? Maybe I'm too deep in the weeds and I've been researching Korea for too long, so I know that they're just normal human beings with a very based ideology and a lot of patriotism. But like, this is so mind-blowing to watch. There are all these vloggers who take their phones and film their day-to-day lives. What is going on here? I don't know, maybe the same thing that's going on in literally every other country, which is that kids have technology now and they make vlogs to share their lives with other kids and other people. I mean, vlogging is universal. Every single country has vlogging. But then when the DPRK does it, and they do it in a better way, where they don't have a bunch of degenerates poisoning society, when they actually have wholesome vloggers, they're like, what is going on here? We thought the people of the DPRK weren't allowed to smile. It's like, what's going on here is you're realizing that the people of the DPRK are just normal human beings, and it doesn't compute in your brain because you've been so programmed by Western propaganda that you think another group of humans is a bunch of aliens. That's what's going on here. You can't accept that North Koreans are just normal-ass people for the most part.
In the last few years, more and more social media channels have been popping up that give us a glimpse into what North Korea is actually like. Well, allegedly.
I'm going to show you the changing appearance of Pyongyang and people's daily life as well as mine. There are so many items, different in color, shape, and flavor.
A lot of North Korean content goes viral, especially on TikTok.
This is what I was talking about before, where the propaganda about North Korea has backfired on the United States. Now people are fascinated by Korea because they've made it this mysterious thing that we can't possibly understand. And they've been told that it's this evil, satanic dictatorship where nobody's allowed to smile or have any fun without getting shot. So then when they see actual videos of people just living their lives in the DPRK, they're like, what? Does not compute. They're fascinated by it. Like that video of the two guys going to Korea and getting their hair cut. And they're just like, oh, yeah, we just got a normal haircut. And people are like, what? That's all it takes to shock people. Now, because North Korea the DPRK has been so demonized in the media, all Americans need to see is someone shopping at the DPRK and their fucking minds are blown. So it's now backfiring on America, and it's showing people how little they actually understand about the world. Because if the DPRK of North Korea isn't evil, right? If I've been lied to about that, then that opens the floodgates for everything, right? If the DPRK isn't evil, then holy shit, what else are they, lying to me about? Applying to ACP later tonight to join the Wisconsin chapter. Let's go. We got one, baby. Everybody give a round of applause for internet sociologist joining the crew. Let's go, comrade. You won't regret it. I promise. I know there's dangers that come with calling yourself a communist and being in a communist organization in an anti-communist country. It can be socially difficult, but your country needs you. We need to be the spark that starts the prairie fire that actually fixes this country. We're headed for civil war. We're headed for devastation. The ruling class does not know how to fix the contradictions at the core of our system. Everybody's drowning in debt. The time is coming for change, and the time is coming for people to be bold and to stand up and to say, no, communism is what's right. I don't care what the media has told you. I don't care what the ruling class who's robbing us blind has told you. This is what's right. And you know what? People will get on board. I've changed thousands and thousands of minds since I started doing this. And the more people we get on board, the more that growth can be exponential. The more that you can reach people who maybe I can't reach. And then those people can reach people that maybe you can't reach. So we just got to keep snowballing. So that's why I get so fucking pumped up when I see that somebody joined the ACP. So red salute, comrade. Thank you. And thanks for the 2. Good evening, comrades. What up? I see that you changed your name, comrade. Good to see you, though. Thank you for the 2. The OG, the GOAT. Socialism is the people. If you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself. Fred Hampton. Possibly my favorite quote ever by one of my very favorite human beings in all of history. Killed at the age of 21 by the Chicago police, by the capitalist state, because he was too effective as an organizer.
Finally, the world gets to see a different side of this mysterious country. The beautiful beaches, for example.
The North Korea they don't show you.
This part's actually true. He's right. Just like I was saying, the country's so mysterious to people when they get to see the actual, what it's actually like. It's mind-blowing to them.
The full refrigerators, where you can even find bananas.
Banana.
Or how beautiful the capital is.
What the fuck was banana? They even have bananas? No way.
lit up at night. They show people strolling
They have cell phones too. Obviously. I mean, they wouldn't have vlogs if they didn't have cell phones, I guess.
down the street, enjoying a beer in a bar, or snacking on fast food. The good life.
All North Koreans have cars.
Videos like this one gain over 40 million views. The channels are supposedly run by locals, living in the beautiful DPRK, proud citizen of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
I gotta follow some of these people. I bet you they follow me. I bet you a few of these accounts are Midwestern Marx fans.
Yeah, but wait a second. How can these channels even post their videos from North Korea?
Also in Nordkorea gibt es zwar
Because they have internet. Because they built their own internet that the US can't flood with propaganda like they did to Libya and like they did to Syria. And do you know how innovative and fucking genius this is? That these guys are isolated from the world, held under sanctions, and they want to give their people the internet, but they can't because they know the US will flood it with propaganda and overthrow their country, or try to overthrow their country like they did with the Arab Spring in Libya and Syria. So they just built their own internet. They built Pyongyang Net. I can't remember what it's called. They've got some name for it. Kyoryolink. They built their own, and it also gives them access to the broader internet for certain situations. So, yeah, and people always talk about this, like China and the US censor their internet. How could they? Research the Arab Spring. Please research the Arab Spring. The United States used the internet to create, like, coalitions of terrorist groups and of anti-government forces and overthrow foreign governments, basically just with the internet. Not just with the internet, it was multifactorial, but the core thrust of what they did in that region, which ultimately led to the devastation of Libya and the return of open-air slave markets to that country, was done through the internet and through the funneling of internet propaganda into those countries. So if China didn't have the Great Firewall or the DPRK didn't have their own internet, they would be dealing with way worse problems. So it's a necessity that's enforced upon them by imperialism from foreign countries.
Intranet, und da gibt es auch diverse Apps und so weiter. Also
and also there's the range of stuff that's allowed is very wide. Very wide. There's like a really hyper woke feminist movement in China. It's not very popular, but it exists and it's allowed to exist. There's Jeffersonian liberals in China. There's freaking every ideology you can imagine, and they all produce their own art. They don't mind freedom of debate. They just don't want foreign entities influencing their politics. They want it to all be debate within China, so there aren't any foreign interests exerting themselves on China.
Ganz hinterm Mond sind die nicht, aber die haben kein Internet.
This is Dr. Rüdiger Frank. He's a professor of East Asian Studies at the University of Vienna and has been studying North Korea for over 30 years. Ordinary citizens in North Korea don't have access to our normal internet. Only a few thousand of the 25 million inhabitants have this privilege.
Also letztlich so gut wie gar niemand.
Wait, what
And
they
even
say there?
those have only limited studies at the University of Vienna and has been studying North Korea for over 30 years. Ordinary citizens in North Korea don't have access to our normal internet. Only a few thousand of the 25 million inhabitants have this privilege.
Oh yeah, that's true for the reasons I explained. But they can get, like, for government officials and stuff, they can access the broader internet.
Also letztlich so gut wie gar niemand.
And even those have only limited access. So it's very unlikely that an ordinary citizen in North Korea would record these videos and post them online on TikTok. It makes you wonder, who is actually running these accounts? Anyone duped by these videos could probably spend some time improving their critical thinking skills. Luckily, there's an app that helps you do just that. Brilliant is an interactive learning.
Anyone duped by these videos? What do you mean duped? The videos are actually videos of their day-to-day life. What do you mean duped? Just because the government gives them access to the broader internet means it's a lie? All that does is disprove your claim that no citizens of the DPRK actually have access to the broader internet. But of course, they got to use that to plug some ad. This is the real dictatorship. The dictatorship of corporations, where we can't escape a freaking ad for 10 minutes of our lives. Elizabeth, thank you for the 20. Thank you. You've been very generous lately. Elizabeth also gave us a bunch of donations yesterday, so really appreciate that, comrade. Thank you for your support. Recommendations for books, YouTube, podcast on Southeast Asia, DPRK, Vietnam, Laos. That's our anti-bourgeois standpoint. It's impossible to find opposite sides perspectives in war. I would check out, I have a playlist on YouTube called DPRK. That's really good for North Korea. I've got like 12 videos in there, including, and in those videos, I recommend more resources like My Brothers and Sisters in the North, which is a documentary, Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang and Seoul, another documentary about the North Korean defector or South Korean defector industry. So those are really good. I would check out, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I put a lot of work into those. There's also if you go on Monthly Review, they have a good summary of the book, The Korean War by Hugh Dean or Howard Dean. Hugh Dean, I think, not Howard Dean. He's the politician. That's a really good book on the Korean War and what actually went down. As far as Vietnam and Laos, there's tons of sources about that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some specific ones. But there's a lot. I mean, you know, Americans kind of turned against the war in Vietnam and now see it as a mistake. So even a lot of the bourgeois sources will have more of the truth. I hate to say it because Rev Left Radio is like an anti-ACP Maoist, but Rev Left Radio's podcast on Vietnam is actually pretty good. That'd be a good one. Laos, I had, nobody knows about Laos. Actually, Laos, there's not a lot of resources on. Most of what I know about Laos just comes from reading. Like I read this bourgeois textbook about Laos obviously with a critical eye. But yeah, you can also just read bourgeois sources and be critical of them. Like sometimes they'll tell you the truth just in a manipulated framing. And if you know how to deconstruct that framing and pick out the kernels, the rational kernels, that's a good way to learn too. It's not like you need sources from proletarian communists all the time. You can kind of decipher the truth by being critical of bourgeois sources. So sorry, that's a long ramble, but that's what I would recommend. You can also Google Midwestern Marx Vietnam. I'm sure we have some stuff on it. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate your support. Thank you, Internet Sociologist, for another super chat. Non-stop today. I love it. Thank you. A lot of these anti-communist videos only ever upload when they have some sort of crappy company to plug. Absolutely. I mean, that's all these accounts, isn't it? They're after money at the end of the day. You know. And that's why a lot of them are willing to work with the NED, too, in the name of democracy. I don't know about this channel, but they publish a lot of slop. I would not be surprised if this channel, Fern, has some kind of connection to the NED. But thank you both for the super chats. Appreciate you both.
Annual premium subscription. Let's take a closer look at Song A's account.
I'm Song A.
Getting good at deconstructing the New York Times. Yes. That I read the New York Times almost every day. It's almost all I need. I can just pick through their garbage. My dad does the same thing.
I'm from Pyongyang. I'm 11 years old and 5th year in the primary school.
Her channel was founded in January 2022. With her videos, she wants to showcase what life is like in North Korea to her more than 30,000 curious foreign viewers.
Pyongyang, where I live, is a very beautiful and magnificent city. Have you ever been to Pyongyang? Well, if you come here, you'll be totally surprised because literally wherever you go, there are amusement parks.
Her content should probably have a certain feel-good quality, like this trip to a water park.
They definitely cut that out of context. She was going to say everywhere you go, there are amusement parks, and then she was going to continue and say other stuff. But they just cut it off. Like everywhere you go, there's an amusement park. There is a badass amusement park in Pyongyang.
Friend. In this episode, Song A takes us with her on her first day at a new school. Later, she takes us along on a trip to a children's hospital.
Did you see how they tried to take a clip there where she was looking sad? Watch
Takes
this.
us along on a trip to a children's hospital.
This
But
is
she's not there, so
the
Song A takes
manipulation.
us with her on her first day at...
See, look at her face. They tried to take the one clip where she looked like she was being tortured or something. As if it's... You can see this kid's happy. This kid's chilling. He's excited. First day of school. Let's go, baby.
The new school. Later, she takes us along on a trip to a children's hospital.
Wait. Where are the rats? Where are the rats? There are supposed to be people eating rats. Yeonmi Park told me that in North Korean hospitals, the people eat rats and then the rats eat people in an endless cycle of rat eating. Okay, so I'm very confused right now. This is clearly propaganda because I don't see anybody taking a big bite of a nice juicy rat.
But she's not there because she needs medical assistance.
However, my heart was pumping with the desire of going to the Only Children's Hospital.
Oh, how I wish I could stay here and play all day.
Song A's videos don't feel authentic. It's like she's reciting lines by heart.
As you can see, this is my school, Yusung Junior Middle School. Already I can feel that I'm having a time here for 3 years. Second,
Maybe it's because English isn't her first language. Maybe she has to write the stuff down before she says it because English isn't her first language. And even if this is propaganda and endorsed by the government, who cares? That doesn't make it wrong. Just because something's produced by a government or because it's intended to have a political meaning doesn't mean it's incorrect. What about what that she's showing us isn't true? Do they not have children's hospitals? Do they not go to school? Do they not have an amusement park in Pyongyang? They do? All those things are true? Okay, then what's wrong with her vlog? This is much better than Jack Doherty or Logan Paul or whatever slop American children are consuming or whatever vlogs our country's producing.
I have studied well and got a certificate.
Her movements seem studied.
I wish with all my little heart that you all, like us,
I do that too when I film TikToks. I practice my hand motions to try and make them look natural. Most clips I film like 3 to 4 times before I get it right.
would overcome these harsh difficulties.
She doesn't even seem like a normal 11-year-old. The fact that she speaks fluent British...
Yes, she does. She does. She just seems smarter than American 11-year-olds who are poisoned by iPads.
English is allegedly thanks to her mother. She taught it to Song A from a very young age. But Song
How dare she? She forced her to learn English, proof of dictatorship.
A leaves out a few important details. She is not just any kid growing up in North Korea. She's the daughter of a North Korean diplomat. She spent part of her childhood in England. She's the granddaughter of the vice foreign minister and great-granddaughter of the former supreme military commander of North Korea. Her family belongs to the elite and is close to the ruling Kim family, a media company run by the North Korean state.
The elite who live in one-bedroom apartments to avoid the look of corruption.
Has allegedly been publishing content
God, the DPRK is so based, man.
on social media platforms since 2017.
Also, the girls been to England, so they prove that people are allowed to leave and see Western societies and access the Western internet.
According to research by the portal NK News, Song A is part of these propaganda productions, and her channel is just one of many. There's the YouTube channel.
How does that prove that it's propaganda? You didn't prove that it's propaganda. You didn't prove anything. You just showed who her relatives were in a very small country where a lot of people are related. What does this prove? All you did was tell us who her grandpa is, and he's some diplomat. Okay. Okay, how does that disprove anything she said in the video? And again, even if it is government-produced propaganda, is it wrong, though? Is it actually incorrect, though?
Echo of Truth with Un-A, which has since been deleted.
Hello, my dear friends. I wish this beautiful April day could cheer you up a little bit.
Or Olivia Natasha, Yumi Space DPRK Daily, also deleted.
And now, you might be wondering, the owners of this split...
Now, I do wonder who deleted them. I wonder if it was the DPRK government who deleted them for some reason, or if it was U.S. tech oligarchs and the U.S. government who deleted them to prevent Americans from getting that information. It could be either. I'm not saying it's one way or the other, but
These new flats are. Believe me or not, houses here are given to ordinary working people free of charge.
However, it's hard to say whether all of these accounts about North Korea are all state-sponsored propaganda. Zoe discovers.
So it sounds like they were banned by the U.S. It sounds like they were banned by U.S. tech oligarchs, which, you know, is the same thing that China does. If there's a U.S. government organization or a U.S. political organization funding the production of content in another country, they'll shut it down, which is what we claim is authoritarian about them. But of course, we do the same thing here in the US. And apparently, there's no evidence that these are actually connected to the Korean state, but they still got shut down. Because all it takes to debunk the US propaganda narrative about Korea is a vlog. All it takes is some citizen walking around with their phone and showing what their day-to-day life is like, and it blows up these narratives that we've heard about the DPRK being hell, literally hell on earth, where you're not, smiling is made illegal and haircuts are made illegal. All it takes to debunk that is a girl with a cell phone. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if the US was specifically nuking that kind of content.
For example, works for a British tourism company in China, Koryo Tours, and Young Wai Shin, that offers trips to North Korea. In over 200 videos on her YouTube channel and on TikTok, she shows us the beautiful sides of the country. She visits North Korean festivals, goes skiing, or shows us how North Korean families live.
Are you happy to be going back to Pyongyang?
Yeah. I think so.
According to her own statements, she does not receive anything in return for her content. It is not a propaganda account.
So this girl explicitly states that she's not funded by the state.
And not sponsored by the North Korean government. We were unable to verify this, however.
Gerade wenn die länger bestehen und wenn die professionell gemacht sind, kann man schon davon ausgehen, dass das mit Billigung des Staates passiert, und das würde also für uns definitiv unter Propaganda fallen.
Oh, but it's propaganda because it doesn't go along with the US narrative. It doesn't even have to be funded by the North Korean government anymore. As long as this random liberal professor doesn't like it, then it's propaganda. It's like the Zionist explanation of propaganda. Anything that accuses us of genocide comes from Qatar.
So her content might be actively tolerated because it paints a favorable picture, even if she might produce it independently. North Korea loves propaganda, on state television, on giant screens projected onto hotel walls, or as action movies.
Thank God. Thank God America is not the same way. Thank God there are no State Department funded action movies that get made in Hollywood. That would be bad, right? If Lone Survivor or American Sniper were connected to the US State Department and were actually military propaganda, thank God that we don't have to deal with that. Otherwise, we'd be a dictatorship, right, guys? For those who don't know, those movies were basically created by the US military, as is Call of Duty, the most popular video game in America.
Kim Jong-un was not
What
democratically
the hell was that?
elected. His rule is based solely
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. They have an election every year. The supreme leader has to be elected every single year.
on ideology. Somehow, he has to legitimize that power.
Not every single year, but he has terms. They do elect that position. And they don't know if it's going to be someone from the Kim family who takes over after Kim Jong-un either.
In solchen Systemen wie eben Nordkorea läuft in ganz wesentlichen Teilen über die Propaganda.
Oh, God, dude. Doesn't this guy make you hate Europeans?
This applies both.
They're just so snobby and so arrogant, but so full of shit. Their anti-Russia, anti-China, anti-Korea sentiment is like worse than the United States, I swear.
Within and outside the country, everything found on social media is propaganda meant for the outside world. Of course, because North Koreans don't have the internet. That content is primarily intended to prove how well the country is doing. Life in North Korea is supposedly not as miserable as the Western media make it out to be.
It's not. It's not. And you can't disprove what they're saying. So you just accuse them of being funded by the government without evidence. And even if they were funded by the government, their message would still be correct. North Korea is not a hell on earth. It's a brave and patriotic society that sacrificed 20% of its population to fight off the brutal US invaders. And they're heroic for doing so.
North Korea.
Quite the opposite. Just take a look. North Korea has great schools, hospitals, better fast food than McDonald's, and even banana. Just to be clear, the truth is that there is virtually no prosperity in North Korea.
Shut the fuck up. We're not listening to any of this. The truth is that everything you just saw was AI. Oh, wait, it's not? The hospitals and the schools and all the things they showed us are real? then how do you explain them away? Oh, by saying North Korea is in poverty and claiming that these videos are funded by the government. What a sad, pathetic attempt to debunk what these vloggers are showing people, which is that the DPRK are just regular people, but also an inspiring and brave and courageous people committed to independence and their collective society, unlike us Americans who are individualistic and consumeristic and selfish, because that's the kind of culture that we're brought up in, whereas their culture is collectivistic and not as narcissistic as ours. I have a theory that narcissism is such a problem in the United States because our culture breeds narcissism. Similar, I think our culture also breeds autism, actually, or what is labeled as autism. But I think narcissism isn't just something that you're born with, right? This Western idea of psychology, that you're just born with your brain a certain way. You're born with ADD. You're born with narcissism. It's not accurate. The environment that you're in can indoctrinate you with more narcissistic traits. Your development can make you more narcissistic, and our selfish, imperialistic, violent, consumeristic, money-based society, I think, breeds narcissism in people and makes them more selfish and exacerbates some of the worst tendencies that certain individuals have psychologically. And they don't have that in Korea, which is beautiful. Thank you, Internet Sociologist, again with the 10. Appreciate you, brother. America is more censored than we claim to be because it's under the guise of violating rules on social media. Free speech has been thrown out of the window since the Cold War. Absolutely. Yeah, that's how they do it. They say you violated our terms of service, and these are private companies, so therefore they're allowed to kick you off. And it's like, well, the government isn't the only institution that can do censorship. If all of our media platforms and all the platforms of communication are owned by a handful of Wall Street shareholders, should they have the right to censor whoever they want? Should they have the right to control all the platforms of communication and then censor them based on their own political preferences? Right? Because this is what Americans say. As long as it's not the government doing it, right? As long as it's a corporation brainwashing me and censoring me and not the government, then it's okay because they're private and they should be allowed to do whatever they want. But if you allow those private entities to own everything, if they control all the platforms, then it's, no different than the government censoring somebody. Thank you very much, Internet Sociologist. Are there any communists that recruit Amish trying to leave their community? They are hard workers and good at farming and building houses. I don't know, Robe Life Music. Thank you for the 5. I appreciate you. I can't say I've ever been to an Amish community. I knew a guy named Ed in high school who was Amish. He shared a name with me and he left the community. He was a party animal on Rumspringa. But I don't know. He was a hard worker. He built a house. So maybe that's the move, to infiltrate the Amish communities with Marxist theory. I'm not sure. I don't know if they understand. I mean, I guess they would probably be opposed to the outside world. I don't know if they would be opposed to advancing technology and I don't know if they would support, increasing the productive forces, but maybe people who left the Amish community would. I don't know. Interesting question. Thank you, though. I know the Amish were really pissed at Kamala Harris and Biden for screwing them over. Biden screwed over the Amish right before the election, like an idiot. And all these Amish people went out and voted for Trump because Biden tried to infringe on their land rights or something right before the election. What are you doing, bro? Literally just turned the Amish people against you. Oh, I saw some people talking about that CNN clip earlier in chat where they go to the DPRK. This is one of the funniest clips of all time. I'm hyping it up too much now, but I love this. This is so funny. The part where the kids are playing video games. I hope this is the right one. I think it is. Just wait till you see the kids playing video games. You'll love this.
This is the North Korea you know. This is the North Korea you've never seen. Stories you've never heard.
Is that a legend or did that actually happen?
I can't believe they let CNN in. I can't believe the DPRK was like, yeah, whatever, come on in, take a tour. Just goes to show that they're not scared of people seeing what their society's actually like. Because they knew CNN was going to portray them as demons.
Our general is really a person who heaven sent to us.
They act like that's so crazy when we just covered the Korean War. Kim Il-sung was a hero. The U.S. had specific battalions whose whole job was to kill Kim Il-sung because he was such an effective general and organizer. So yeah, you know, saying that he was sent from heaven, it's obviously hyperbole. She's not saying he was actually ordained by God. But yeah, he's a national hero for them. The same way, you know, you could say that Abe Lincoln was sent from heaven to end slavery. And that's what a lot of abolitionists at the time were saying. People like John Brown, he was dead at the time, but, you know, he was a religious Puritan who believed that God was bringing an end to slavery. You know, it's not a foreign idea that you have national heroes who are sent by God to help your country. That's how a lot of Americans see fucking Trump.
Never been. People with a common enemy. Who do you want to fight?
To fight the sworn enemy, Americans.
What if I told you I'm an American? Do you want to shoot me too? Unprecedented.
Oh, they cut it off. The kid says yes. The kid tells him yes. They're like playing this video game where they shoot Americans. And he's like, do you want to shoot me? The kid's like, yeah.
14 and 15. Even in North Korea, kids love video games. For these 14 and 15-year-olds, these are not just games. This is practice for real life. Most of these...
Imagine someone coming to America and filming some teenagers playing Call of Duty or some little kids, or you know, mouth agape, playing Call of Duty, not knowing that Call of Duty is basically created by the U.S. Army and the U.S. State Department. And then they were like, for Americans, this is not just a game. COD's not just a game. They're training to kill Russians. And think about it. Who do you kill in American video games? You always kill U.S. enemy states. You always kill Russians or Koreans or Cubans or whatever. And of course, the U.S. State Department funds Call of Duty and is involved with the creation of those games. So how is that any different than the DPRK having games where they fight their state enemies connected to the government? It's the exact same thing we do in the U.S., but when they do it, it's evil propaganda and they're brainwashing the youth. Well, there's much more truth to the idea that Call of Duty and Avengers and all of this Hollywood slop connected to the U.S. government is actually brainwashing our youth.
Boys, and a lot of the girls, will spend their first years of adulthood serving in the Korean People's Army, just like their parents and grandparents before them. What do you like about...
Yeah, and just like everyone in South Korea, you know, South Korea has mandatory military service, right? Are you going to mention that? Or are you going to say that military service makes the DPRK evil?
This game.
Killing the enemy.
Hitting the enemy? Who's the enemy?
Americans.
Beast! Beast! Why'd they cut out the part where he asks him, would you want to shoot me? I'm pretty sure the kid tells him yes.
Slaughtered our people. Buried
Oh, here. This kid's so based.
to fight the sworn enemy, Americans.
What do they teach you about Americans in school?
They forcibly invaded us, slaughtered our people, buried them alive and killed them.
True. All true. 100% factual. 20% of their population killed by America in an offensive and illegal invasion. And what's so ironic about this is that this guy is trying to say that they're brainwashed when he doesn't know the real history of America in Korea. So it's the American who's brainwashed, who doesn't understand very, very basic history, and it's the young Korean children who do. And the American is so arrogant and so confident in his brainwashing that he thinks the Koreans are the ones who look like idiots. Oh, the Korean kids think that America killed their people. Oh, what a brainwashed idiot. Hey, retard, it's true. Everything that kid said is true. 20% of their population. Every building over 2 stories tall was leveled. American pilots were complaining to their higher-ups that there was nothing left to bomb. He's right. You're wrong. And you're saying that he's brainwashed, but you are. And you work for a brainwashing outlet in CNN whose whole job is to do things like this and distort history.
So they teach you that the Americans are the enemy and you need to shoot them, to fight them?
Yes.
Here's where things get awkward.
What if I told you I'm an American? Do you want to shoot me too?
Yes. There are good.
Get wrecked, CNN. They're just like, yeah, kinda. Especially when you're asking me these dumbass questions. Shut up, buddy. I'm training for the coming World War III. And yes, I'm coming for your ass. You propaganda. Look at the kid smirk, too. He's just like, I told off this douchebag, corporate, brainwashed, liberal CNN fucking dick. Get wrecked by young Korean children who have a better grasp on history than you because their country actually educates them, which is what we call propaganda. Anything that makes us look bad is propaganda, even if it's true. God, I love that clip. Just inject that into my veins. I want to wake up to that every morning. That kid telling off the CNN guy. And it's so ironic, too, just because of Call of Duty. You know, my whole life I grew up watching all of my friends play Call of Duty, mouths agape, you know, literally being hypnotized by the screen. And then growing up to find out that Call of Duty was basically a U.S. government psyop. Mint Press News, if you want more evidence on that, Mint Press News has published a bunch about it. I've also done a bunch of TikToks about it. But it's just so funny that, you know, we see another country doing the same thing that we do, playing video games where they shoot us the same way we do with Russians and Cubans and every other country. And we're so appalled by it. We're so appalled that another country would do the exact same thing we do, except it's not the exact same thing because the countries that you fight in Call of Duty have never invaded America. Russia's never invaded America. Cuba's never invaded America. America actually did invade Korea and kill one person in every family of 5, which means the people in that country are still living with the trauma of what the U.S. did to their ancestors and to their country. So it actually is different in that way. It's more justified when they do it. I'd love to play that video game those kids are playing. That was so funny. That clip will never get old for me. They def trolling. They were totally trolling. You saw them laughing too. They probably know what CNN. Someone probably told them too. Like this is some American imperialist outlet that wants to take over. Take over your country in the name of democracy, so you can be just like South Korea and live in Squid Game but real life. That's what we need. That's what the whole world needs. And also, last thing, when it comes to a lot of the unique cultural aspects in the DPRK, so like, for example, when Kim Jong-il died, all the people were doing public mourning. They were going out and they were crying and crying. And what the U.S. media said was that they were being forced to do that by the government, and anybody who stopped crying would be killed or imprisoned or whatever. But public mourning is a thing in South Korea, too. They do the exact same thing in South Korea when leaders die. They just don't show it on television because it can't be used as a propaganda point, and it would debunk the propaganda about the North. But South Koreans do that, too, where they, like, fake cry, this public mourning thing. It's a cultural thing. Like, oh, and the idea is, like, we're all sad together. We're all mourning together. It has nothing to do with communism. It's part of Korean culture. And that's true of a lot of things. You know, a lot of things that are true of the North are also true of the South. They're different now because the South has been liberalized and, you know, occupied by the United States for however many years, essentially. But, you know, many of the cultural things that they have that are used as propaganda points against the North are true of both. DPRK tells the harsh but true reality of how America is. America put sugar and candy on it to hide the moldy cookie. Yeah, that's why I like talking about the Korean War so much, because it's like a microcosm for all of U.S. imperialism. you have this heroic, independent, sovereign country that's been fighting imperialism for decades, that's portrayed as evil, the demons. And then you look into history and see that we're actually the demons. We massacred their population and occupied their country and did all these horrible things. So it really opens your eyes and gets you to see that everything I've been told about history is reversed. It's literally flipped on its head. The good guys are portrayed as the bad guys, and the bad guys are portrayed as the good guys. Except for, you know, in the case of World War II with Hitler, where he actually was the bad guy. But then they write out the role that the communists played in fighting him, and they make Britain and the US out to be the heroes, when it was actually China and the Soviets fighting Japan and Germany for the most part. Only the British and Japan have ever invaded America by any definition of the word, and it's still great we're allies with both countries, but Russia never invaded. Yes, exactly. Very true. You know, we should be enemies with Japan and Britain by that standard, but of course it doesn't have to do who the US targets doesn't actually have to do with defending ourselves or them being the aggressors. The countries we target are those who try to take control of their own resources and take resources out of the hands of multinational corporations and banks. That's the real key. Yeah, otherwise the US would hate Britain and Japan. And Japan barely invaded us. I mean, part of the reason they made Hawaii a state, I believe, was so that they could say that Pearl Harbor was an invasion of U.S. territory, and justify nuking Japan. I know Madeline Pendleton hates you, but I love her DPRK videos exposing the Fed account trying to cancel her. Yeah, dude, I've always supported Madeline. That's why it's so stupid that she hates me for being friends with Haas and Jackson. I'm like, dude, I've always supported you and defended you against these libs who attack you for your tanky positions. And then she's like, oh, you're friends with people who don't color their hair green. How dare you? But yeah, I still support those videos. She can say whatever she wants about me. Her DPRK content's good. I don't give a shit. Say what you want about me. The truth is the truth. Naked imperialism, just like the coming invasion of Venezuela. Absolutely. The open veins. America did Operation Paperclip. They did. They filtered all the Nazis into their own government. That is a principled position, Eddie. I respect that. Thank you, comrade. I wish more people had those principles and didn't take things personally, but it's hard. I know it's easy to take things personal. That's why you got to have a good group of friends and like a good support system outside of politics, or, you know, friends who you're friends with outside of politics, even if they're also interested in politics, you know. You can't put too much into what people are saying about you politically on the internet. Is it true that DSA lifted their ban on democratic centralist organizations joining them? If they did, I would suspect that a DSA-PSL merger is coming. I didn't hear about that, but if DSA actually did that, I bet you they're going to merge with PSL soon, because they're basically the same thing anyway. DPRK is the freest country in the world. You're damn right, brother. Eddie, I have a septum piercing. I can help you bridge the gap between you and Matt. That's right, bro. Just invite me to like a punk show sometime. You and me will go to a punk show. I'll dress up like all punk. I'll get a fake septum piercing, and then we'll send it to Madeline Pendleton and be like, see, we're just like you. Yeah, I feel like people think like we ban people from the ACP if they have like colored hair or a septum piercing or something. We're like, bro, we don't give a shit. That's just a stereotype of like the woke anti-communist leftist. But you can have all the piercings you want, brother. You can have gauges on your nose and join the ACP. We don't care. As long as you care about class struggle, that's all we care about. I'm vegan, but I want to eat those ears, Eddie. Well, that would be their cauliflower ears, which is still vegan, so you're good. Go ahead and take a bite. Punk shows are fun, though. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. ACP at the Harsh Noise gig. Let's go. I want to do an ACP concert. I'm pretty well connected in the Palestinian music community, or the Palestinian hip-hop community, which is a small community, but there's a lot of really talented artists like Sammy Shablak and Eddie Mack are my two favorite. Look them up if you haven't yet. Badass Palestinian gangster rap, pro-resistance music. From Gaza Strip to Detroit is like my favorite song of all time by Sammy Shablock. But anyways, I've thought about like hosting an ACP concert and just inviting all of them and any other based musical artists who want to perform. I went to one in Chicago with my girlfriend of where those guys were performing, and it gave me the idea, like, why doesn't ACP host one of these? Hopefully Sammy won't copyright strike me. He won't. I've seen people reacting to his music before, but this is Sammy Shablock, who's like my favorite. Him and Eddie Mack, EDDY. He spells it different than me. Listen to the first lines of this.
من النهر للبحر Palestine gon' be free. The occupation want me dead so you can fuck around and see. I got resistance in my blood and that shit loaded in my Jeep. How you killing all these babies but still talking about some peace?
The occupation want me dead so you can fuck around and see. Great line. I mean, I really like hip hop and rap and like hardcore gangster rap because it gets me ready to wrestle. And then you just throw Palestine liberation lyrics in there and it's like amazing. Because my only problem with gangster rap is like it's usually an expression of the lumpen lifestyle, right? Being a criminal and stuff, which is fine. It's an expression of that lifestyle. It's art. But it, you know, it can kind of encourage that lifestyle too. So if you take the gangster rap, rapping about, you know, fighting and being a badass, but you're actually talking about resisting Zionism, it's like, man, I got no problems anymore. I can't complain anymore. It's like you took the one part of gangster rap that I don't love and you made it awesome.
I was banging hoods you don't even own. I was banging my kufia trying to get back home. My youngest fight tanks with these rocks, ain't no Rolling Stone. They cut the internet, my cousin can't pick up the phone. They done try to take us off the map and we still holding on. Ask what I condemn, genocide, is that what y'all condone? Every time I spoke about it, growing up I felt alone. Now I got 1,000 right behind me and we going strong. I'm that topic out the east that got them scared just like Arafat. Find me out on Warren with them Arabs in. But if
Yeah, maybe true, Chenault, but I think the times are changing with PSL and DSA. But yeah, I just thought I'd put you all onto that. Gaza Strip to Detroit. He's a Detroit rapper with family still in Palestine. So here's another one I really like. I might get copyrighted for this. I'm going to skip the sample.
Yeah. Break all the chains, I can't live with my hands tied. I can't die on my knees, I'ma stand trying. Down from the river to the sea, it's a landslide. All my youngest lane shot rock when the tank slide. Where I'm from, you don't see the top, you don't see the crop, you don't see this pain never stop. You look up at the rain in the sky, that's tears for the lives we done lost. I'm feeling like the shepherd around the sheep without no gospel. Can I turn the other cheek if I am looking at the robber? Ain't no robbing, that shit got them out of Gaza, bullet shower. All them soldiers seeing ghosts as the guilt mixed with the power. Are you stupid? You could take a test with your blood, we been through it. Who the fuck did you think that I was? I'm a student.
Yeah. Check out Sammy, he's good. And then Eddie. They'll death slap you with copyright. You can edit in studio. Yeah, probably because of the sample. I can't even think of what sample that is. It's or a Skyfall sample, I think. But yeah, Sammy won't hit me with copyright, but maybe Adele will. Hopefully not. And then this is my boy Eddie. He's a producer too. He's like, they censored his video. It's crazy how they only censor the videos that are politically controversial. But anyways, Eddie is also a producer, and he's like the one who put on that concert that I went to in Chicago. So if ACP ever did do like a Palestinian music concert or anything, it would probably be in conjunction with this guy.
A terrorist organization agreed that Hamas was a terrorist organization.
They're based too. They're not like liberal pro-Palestine. Like They had a sign at the concert that said, like, we honor all the martyrs. So they're with it. They're with the shits.
They're not a state, they're a territory. We're going to turn that into a parking lot.
Sir? Ready to order?
I think I lost my appetite. Thank you. News telling lies, check the facts that they cover. Cause my people out here crying, or they dying, or they suffer. And just notice for my people up in Gaza and Ramallah, and it's free Palestine until it's backwards, motherfucker. I'm a speaker for my people, fuck this rap shit. Forcing children out their homes when they ain't have shit. Killing mothers, children, asking why there's no one here to love them. And y'all really asking questions why it's war, motherfuck them. Cause I know that everyone knows it's time to take Palestine back this time. We won't hesitate now, I know that this is the sound of war. What about?
Yeah. Really like that song. So check out Eddie and Sammy. They're great. Kneecap too, yeah, they're good too. Except they came out after they got all that criticism, they came out and condemned the resistance, which was lame. But I think they might have been arrested if they didn't. So I get it. I'm pro-Palestine, but anti-Hamas. Isn't that crazy when people say that shit? I would play Kneecap, but I don't want to get copyright struck. And I know those two personally. I don't know Kneecap personally, so that's why I was comfortable playing their music, because I know they'd be cool with it. But anyways, yeah. I have like one family of relatives who's still Zionist. I've won most of them over, but like one on one side of my family who's like still Zionist, the family that like visits Israel. And I'm just gearing up to have a Hamas conversation with them at Christmas. And I'm going to tell them straight up, like, if the same thing that's happening to Palestine was happening in America, every young person would be in a similar group to that. I'm not going to say exactly what I'm going to tell them in real life because I don't want to get banned from YouTube, but I'm going to say if something like that was happening here in America, the young, fit, healthy men who would be doing similar things. They'd be resisting. So my brother is a Zionist. That's tough. What's he got, a Jewish girlfriend or something? I've seen that happen to people. They start dating a Zionist and all of a sudden they're like, what's happening to Israel is terrible. I cannot believe it. Are the UFC fights started yet? Yep. Round one. The first two fights have already happened. Well, 3 fights, 3 finishes, 4 fights. Holy cow. 4 fights. 4 finishes. Wow, must be a good card. I'm going to go watch that. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with me today. 2 days in a row. I will continue to bring you more frequent streams. Join the Midwestern Marks Discord and send me any videos that you would like me to react to. As I do more streams, I'm going to be running out of ideas and looking to the Discord for some of them. So if you want to see me react to something specific, please send it over. The shorter, the better. Thank you all so much for the super chats and your support. If you want to support us financially, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks is the best way to do so, or become a YouTube member. You get the perks of Carlos's books, Why We Need American Marxism, and The Purity, Fetish, and the Crisis of Western Marxism. Try to make it worth it for you guys. Also, a bunch of exclusive videos on our Patreon, so you'll get your money's worth. But yeah, I appreciate you all for hanging out with me today. Join the ACP at acp.us, and we'll see you on the next one, maybe as soon as tomorrow or Monday. All right, peace, everybody.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken now they must give. And end the vanity of nations. We've but one earth on which to live. So come brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal